reading this passage this week got me to thinking about rules that we are to follow as Christians, and just rules in general, laws, guidelines, which led me to thinking about commandments and eventually to Jesus' words here, which kind of resemble the Beatitudes. And as I thought about those things, I thought about, what are some of the rules that we follow? And I found a number of interesting rules and some laws that are kind of scattered across our nation and in some cities that I found were interesting. I'm not going to identify all the areas that some of these rules or laws come from, but you may be able to figure out a few of them. But did you know that in some areas you're prohibited to open an umbrella on a street? I don't know why. Dominoes are not to be played on Sunday in some states. It's illegal to throw confetti or spray silly string. Fortunately, that's not the law in Texas, because I would be guilty of that. One, though, that's interesting, because, we're all bird lovers, especially with the price of eggs these days. But did you know flamingos are not allowed in barbershops? That's in Florida. That's the case there. And in, I think this was Connecticut, dogs are not allowed to bark after 6 p.m., which was a problem for a long time until they were able to fit all the canines with wristwatches. Those are, some baseball fans I know in the crowd. Did you know that for a long time, I think it's been repealed now, but in Pennsylvania it was spitting was only permitted on a baseball diamond. And I think, is it still in Texas that you can't sell cars on either Saturday or Sunday, one or the other? Is that still one of the leftover blue laws? I think it is, which, has affected all of us, I'm sure. And you're not supposed to walk backwards after sunset, and not allowed to live on a boat more than 30 days. I think that was North Carolina. And one that I have no problem with, I don't think I've ever broken this law. This is a county in Georgia has a specific law that it is illegal to eat fried chicken with anything except your hands. I don't know if it's the same county, but there's also another county in Georgia where it's illegal for chickens to cross roads. And, I know Vanji and Emanuela, of course, have spent some time in Africa, as I have, and one of the laws in Africa is that if you run over a chicken, you have to stop and pay for it. And then what we did, we would then have it for supper. But it was a very strict rule. Good news on Valentine's Day for some of us, it's prohibited in Kentucky, I think it is, to give a box of chocolates that weighs more than 50 pounds. You have to keep your chocolate gifts below 50 pounds or risk going to jail. I know it's not illegal around here, but in some places it's illegal to give whiskey to dogs. There's a portion of Indiana. Indiana is one of those that they don't observe daylight savings time, I think, and they've got some other odd things. And there's a part of Indiana, and I don't know what part it is. I guess maybe the round down area, if you want to use it there, because the value of pi is not 3.1414141414, but in that area, which a couple of counties, I think, the value of pi is just 4. So, for those of you that struggle with math, that would have helped if you'd have grown up there. In Kansas, it's illegal to catch catch fish with bare hands. Some of my ancestors would be in jail for that, I know. Christmas decorations not supposed to be up past January 14th in some areas. It's not permitted to take a lion to the movies, that in Alabama. It's unlawful to give beer to hospital patients in several areas. I think around here it's frowned upon but not illegal. And I love this one. Anyone disturbing a church service is subject to citizen's arrest. I'm looking at some of you. Donut holes are not to be sold, only given away. Some places. Camels are not allowed on highways. There are no slippers to be seen in public at public stores and stuff like that before 10 p.m. And this one for you, Jeff, and I could not find where this was specifically. I don't think it's here, but just in case, it's illegal to sing off key. In Wisconsin, it used to be illegal to serve beer and pretzels at the same time. Had to bring them out separately. And I and some of you have probably experienced in New Jersey and in Oregon that you can't pump your own gas. First time I tried to do that in Oregon, had a campaign up there, and I pulled in to fill up the rent car before I took it back to the airport, and 3 guys came on me, and I thought I was in trouble. I really did. I thought, what? Because they're all just surrounding me. No, you can't do that. I said, I got to have gas. And they explained to me in a fairly aggressive way but you can't pump it. We have to pump the gas in the car. Anybody else experienced that? New Jersey, I know, in Oregon, yeah. Yeah. And for us guys that, like to pump our own gas, it's a bit of an issue, but they let me go. And then the last one, illegal in Louisiana to catch a fish using a lasso. You can't rope them. And although these are actual laws, or I'm guessing that they're enforced more as rules or guidelines or things you need to not do in order to live, peaceably in those cities or states or counties. And I'm not sure what the punishment is. I didn't find that for breaking those laws or rules, but you can be sure that there were punishments associated with each of those to begin with, whatever they might be. In fact, the punishment part is really what sets apart rules and laws and guidelines from the things that Jesus talks about in Luke chapter 5. What Jesus is suggesting in Luke chapter 5, there's no punishment per se on these things, and so it's different than rules and laws. And when you think about rules and laws and those kind of things, rules apply to specific organizations, social groups, and they're enforced internally. You step out of line, and if you're a member of, I don't know if it still exists, but there used to be a Red Hat Society, and in Mount Pleasant, Texas, it was the Red Hat Mafia was what they called it, and it was strictly enforced that you wore that red hat whenever they met. And a friend, I'll give her first name in case she's listening in, but my friend Vertus was a member of that, and she got very upset because she had left her hat at home for a meeting, and they would not allow her in the country club without her red hat. They were enforced pretty stringently. Laws are set apart by the state and or the local government, and there's punishment for those things. You break those laws, you're going to get a ticket or go to jail. There are fines. There's court action. It's very you know what you're in for. Guidelines are a bit looser. There's no direct punishment necessarily, and it's like your doctor recommending you to exercise, ever how many minutes a day, and we won't do a show of hands, but I'm going to guess that most of us are guilty to some extent of not accepting those guidelines. But what's the punishment? Well, it shows up, but the punishment doesn't necessarily come from your doctor, other than him encouraging you or her encouraging you to do what's right. But then there's those things that Jesus suggests, those beatitudes or attitudes to be, if you will, where the punishment phase is really not there. They're not designed with a consequence if you don't, which that kind of sets them apart. And when you think about it, at this particular time in his ministry, Jesus was kind of giving a pep talk to his disciples. In last week's lectionary, we read where Jesus had told them, "Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, when they revile you and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven." So a little bit of a pep talk, because Jesus knew that the disciples' lives would not be easy and that they would be rejected. They would be despised. And so Jesus follows these words, this little pep talk, with a message about loving their enemies. Their response to persecution and those things that Jesus said is coming your way was not to be the norm for society. I mean, at the time, much like our times, response to persecution is retribution. I mean, we want to get even. Someone hurts us, abuses us, or does anything to us that's unjust, our natural response is that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality. That was the norm then, and it was an accepted norm and expected, and to a large extent, it's that way today. Jesus provided, though, this new standard, this nonviolent, positive approach to any form of hostility. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Are any of us able to live up to such an impossible standard as that? I don't know of anyone, including myself, because the order of the day for us in our society is pretty much the same as it was then. Payback is still, I mean, that's our fallback. That's our default, is to repay whatever's done to us in the same way or worse. So what do we do with this impossible standard that Christ set out? And really, what's the payoff to us if we can succeed even just a little bit in adopting, that kind of life? What is the return on investment if we invest in these exercises of loving enemies and helping those that hurt us and blessing those who curse us and praying for those who abuse us, even allowing people to ridicule and insult us, and giving to those that we know will never repay us? What's the payoff? What's the return on investment there? Well, I think there are a couple of really powerful messages tucked away in that passage that we read earlier, because we tend to focus on the instructions that Jesus is giving the disciples, and I think maybe we gloss over an important message, and that is that return on investment on those actions. That because there is an incredible return on investment there. It's huge, but we tend to focus, I think, too much on, well, I'm not sure I can do that. That's a tall order. The first of these messages comes right at the beginning of the reading, and it's one of those. Those of you that have children, did you ever have to reach and grab your child and, listen to me, kind of thing? It's unheard of, I know, but occasionally you may have seen it. And this is pretty much what Jesus says in verse 627, but I say to you who are listening. And you might paraphrase that to sound something like this. Here's something to write down and remember, fellas. Not everyone who hears what I'm about to say is really listening. Many of you will nod your heads and go along, but you won't really hear what I'm saying. Why? Because what I'm about to tell you is hard to hear. It's hard to understand, but for those of you, and it goes against your nature, some of the things I'm about to say, but for those of you who do hear and understand, there's good stuff coming your way. Because it won't be your human nature that is in control if you do these things. It will be your spiritual nature, your better self. Now, let's be honest. We all know when we're operating out of the Spirit of Christ that dwells in us, and when we're operating out of self. And so Jesus said, I say to you who are listening, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you, those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you, turn the other cheek. Anyone takes your coat, give them your shirt also. Love your enemies. Do good. Lend, expecting nothing in return. And here's the kicker, and your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. Now, you may think you probably do think I'm about half nuts, but you may think I'm crazy when I tell you this, but in my experience, when a child is born, the parents of the mom think the baby looks like the mom, or his or her family, I should say. And the parents of the dad tend to think that the baby looks like the dad, or his family, for the most part. Right? I mean, we kind of see that, like I said, I'm painting in broad strokes, but generally speaking, we tend to lean that way. And by the way, I have proof on my phone if you'd like to see it later. There's confirmation with this picture of my grandson, Bryant, and he looks just like me. Truth is, I think both are correct. I think that newborns look like their parents, both of them, period. And so it's not too much of a stretch to think that we who are born of the Spirit should resemble our parent. We should look like children of God. Jesus makes it pretty clear that when we do the things outlined in the verses that we read, when we love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, and bless those who curse us, when we pray for those who abuse us, and turn the other cheek, and give away our coats and our shirts, when we love our enemies, when we do good, when we lend, expecting nothing in return, when we do those things, we resemble the divine, our Creator, our Sustainer, our Redeemer, our God. And that's a pretty substantial return on investment, don't you think? For someone to see you or to see me and how we act and respond, and to recognize God at work in those responses and those actions is a pretty good thing. But wait, do you remember the name Ron Popeil? The inventor of the Popeil pocket fisherman? Some of you remember those ads on TV. He's famous for a lot of things, but one of the things that he's famous for is the phrase, or two of them actually. One was set it and forget it, but the other one was, but wait, there's more. And there is more. There's more return on investment. If you think that people seeing our actions and responses as we walk through life as reflecting the divine, if you think that's great, well, wait, there's more. Jesus closes his set of instructions for living these simple beatitudes, if you will, with this phrase, or with this thought: forgive and you will be forgiven. Give and it'll be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Now, as a stewardship consultant for the last almost 30 years, I and my colleagues have used those words to assure church members that the return on investment of their offerings will be significant, virtually risk-free even. And I'm absolutely certain that when it comes to giving our tithes and offerings, that we'll receive abundantly more blessing with the 90% that God has blessed us, or that God blesses once we give the 10% to the kingdom, than we could ever do with 100% on our own. I'll never be convinced otherwise, because I've seen it all of my life. But I'm not really sure that Jesus was talking just about money here. I think he was giving us a recipe for abundance, but not just in the financial realm, but in the relationship realm as well, in the personal and internal peace realm. Maybe because by following those simple yet hard disciplines, we get the incredible privilege of living lives free of judgment and lives that are open to receiving blessings in good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over into our laps. Why? Because we resemble, as Scripture said, children of the Most High. And that when we do those things, we get that peace and that freedom that comes. There's not a punishment. You know, and it's interesting that as Christ goes through this, there's not a, and if you don't love and give and serve, then it's not there anywhere. It's an opportunity to invest in those activities whenever and wherever we can, knowing that blessing will come. I could use some of that blessing in good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over into our laps. I could use some of that. How about you?